On this episode of the Common Constitutionalist Podcast, in segment 1 I discuss an article from WorldNet Daily, of which I write for occasionally, where the Republican Party, now that they've got the pledge from Donald Trump not to go third party, are they going to pull a fast one, and if Trump gets the nominee, take their ball and go home? In other words, go third party with somebody like maybe squishy Mitt Romney. In segment 2, I discuss Barack Obama's new nominee to be Secretary of the Army, a longtime Pentagon official named Eric Fanning. Oh yeah, and did I mention he's a homosexual? Of course. And in segment 3, I discuss that ever-popular rapper, yeah, you know him, Waka Flocka Flame. And Waka Flocka has called out Bruce/Caitlyn Jenner for rebuking God in what some have described as a transphobic diatribe. Today, on the Common Constitutionalist.
You're listening to the Common Constitutionalist, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, free from the prying eyes of establishment flag helicopters.
Alright, this is probably the most outrageous thing I've heard coming out of the establishment wing of the Republican Party, maybe ever. First, they get Trump to sign the pledge that he won't go third party, because of course they had a cowosaurus, if that is such a thing. Probably not, but that's okay, it sounds good. If they had a cowosaurus over the fact that Trump exclaimed during the first debate that he wouldn't rule out third party if he didn't get the nominee. And of course everybody had a blank fit over that. So then they finally they convince him to sign the agreement. It's not legally binding or anything, but they get him to sign this agreement publicly stating that he won't go third party and he will, in fact, endorse whoever the nominee is. Okay, so everybody's satisfied. Whoop-de-doo. And now we get this. Now we get the fact, rumors, or maybe a trial balloon, as WorldNet Daily's calling it possibly, that if the establishment doesn't get what they want, if they don't get the guy they want, if Trump becomes the nominee, frankly, to be honest with you, if almost anyone, if Cruz becomes the nominee, if somebody like that becomes the nominee, whether it's Trump or a real conservative gets the nominee, then they're going to take their ball and go home and pout, and then think about going third party with some Nimrod like Mitt Romney, who lost last time miserably. That makes a lot of sense. It's just, to be honest with you, it's like we've said, conservatives have said for a long time, Republican establishment would would rather lose than have a real conservative or somebody who they can't control in the White House. They'd rather lose to a Democrat than have that happen, because conservatives are the number one enemy to the establishment Republicans. It's not the Democrats. It's not ISIS or the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or Iran or anyone else. It's the conservative wing of the Republican Party. Social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, however you want to describe it, they are enemy number one to the establishment. And this, again, is outrageous. So how did we hear about this? Well, obviously a guy at WorldNet Daily, again, whom I write for occasionally, wrote this up. But how we heard about it is this guy, Mark McKinnon. He was a former George W. Bush chief media strategist. I don't know if you know anything about McKinnon. I didn't know a lot, so I read this and I found out. McKinnon used to be a former Democrat consultant. He helped Ma Richards, former Governor Ann Richards. He helped her with her elections in Texas. And he also helped the Michael Dukakis campaign back in, 88, lose to George H.W. Bush. I mean, lose miserably. And then all of a sudden he becomes a Republican and joins the George W. Bush team in 2000 to get him elected. Oh boy. So he's basically a Democrat. You know, he's a hired gun is what he is. I'm sure he's got no loyalty. It certainly doesn't appear he's got no loyalty, and he's probably completely amoral too, but that's beside the point. That's just my opinion. So at any rate, he goes on NPR. Yeah, there are a lot of Republicans that go on NPR. That should give you a clue right off of the bat. And during the NPR interview, he speculates he says the Republican establishment completely freaks out. They get together and say this is unacceptable, but it looks like it's going to happen. As in Trump gets the nominee or a conservative gets the nominee. Probably just Trump at this point. So we go off and we create a new Republican Party as an independent candidacy and draft somebody who's tanned, rested, and ready to go with a lot of money. Somebody like Mitt Romney. That's what McKinnon speculated on air during an independent interview. Of course, McKinnon did temper his comments by saying that a third-party run would be wild and improbable. But of course he had to say that. But according to former Texas Representative Steve Stockman, he's the one that said this sounds an awful lot like a trial balloon. They're floating it out there to see what kind of response they get, see what kind of traction they get to this thing. Stockman said, I think it's absolutely hypocritical and crazy for the moderates to sit there and lecture conservatives about a third party and then turn around and practically advocate that for one of their own. It is absolutely insanity. It is absolute insanity. Stockman went on to say, think about it. This is a Bush consultant. The establishment trashed Trump for refusing to rule out a third party run. Now this guy turns around and suggests a prominent Republican may want to do the very same thing. Of course they're going to want to do. They've got to do something. They've thrown virtually everything they've got, at least as far as we know so far, at Trump. And nothing is sticking. No matter what they do, they can't seem to crack Trump's armor. And it's not like Trump's an unknown entity. Pretty much everything you want to know about Trump, all the dirt there is to dig up about Trump has already been dug up. So it's not like they have their Republican dirty trickster brigade, which no doubt they've got. Usually Karl Rove and those bums have something up their sleeve. But as far as I can see, they've got nothing left to battle Trump other than hope he screws up and says something so ridiculous that people will start walking away from him. But I also got news for them. If people do start walking away from Trump, and just from the sheer the wackiness factor, so to speak, they're not going to Jeb Bush. They're not going to go to some squishy moderate. They're not going to go to Chris Christie or John Kasich or somebody. They're going to go to somebody like Ted Cruz, a real conservative, who's basically waiting in the wings for something like this to occur. I think that's what Cruz's strategy is to wait it out and see what happens. And if Trump fumbles the ball, he's going to be right there to pick it up and run into the end zone with it. That's, I think, what Cruz's strategy is, and frankly, it's a darn smart strategy. It's smarter than any of these other nimrods that keep going after Trump, and again, nothing seems to stick to this guy. It doesn't matter what he says, it doesn't matter how outrageous it is, it just doesn't seem to make a difference. One of these days it might, and again, Cruz is ready he's ready on day one, baby. He's ready to go. But this is the most outrageous thing. I just cannot believe I'm seeing this. But when I think about it, I guess I can. It's all too believable. Like I said before, these guys, I'm telling you, they'd rather lose to a Democrat than lose to a conservative. I'm telling you, it's a fact. So as conservatives, I suggest we just keep our eyes and ears open for some little telltale that tells us that this may actually happen. And if it does happen, it's going to backfire on them big time. It may very well be, and that might be a good thing, frankly. Not might be. It will be a good thing, frankly, that if this backfires on them, it's going to be the end of the moderate, squishy center establishment wing of the Republican Party. They're all going to go down like dominoes, and I'd love to be there to see that. I know it's not very charitable, but boy howdy, that would be nice.